I just finished The Handmaid's Tale for the first time, and, holy crap, I think that was one of the best books I've ever read. Spoilers for a 30-year-old book, I guess. Hello guys and welcome to I Love Reading, a channel about interesting book-related subreddit topics. If you love our content, please press the like button, leave a comment, and lastly, if you're new here, subscribe to our channel. Now let's get started. I don't even know where to begin. I love the disjointed narrative style. You really got a sense that this was just Offred's unfiltered stream of consciousness being spilled onto the page. It's a credit to Atwood's strength as a writer that the plot jumping around was in no way confusing. It was so easy for me to imagine myself in Offred's shoes. I really liked how human and fallible her character was. She felt so three-dimensional and real. I loved her flaws. The way Atwood builds her up as this very sympathetic character before revealing her deep and serious flaws was really well done. I also loved the twist in the epilogue, where a roomful of, mostly male, academics are skeptically discussing the book as an artifact of a bygone era. Gilead is gone, and yet the epilogue makes it painfully clear that humanity as a whole has learned very little from it. I think it was terribly clever of Atwood to make us bond and sympathize with Offred's plight and then yank the rug out by having a bunch of people cast doubt on the reliability of her narrative. The epilogue was genuinely hard for me to listen to. I read the audiobook version at times. I wanted to reach into the story and shake them by the scruffs of their shirts for their arrogance and incredulity. The version I read had an afterword that discussed how fucked up it is that the academics put so much time and effort into trying to discover the identities of the men Offred writes about, but had little interest in doing the same for her. Again, terribly clever of Atwood in my opinion. I had never watched the show before. I tried the pilot and couldn't make it more than 20 minutes in. It was too painful, but this makes me want to give it another try maybe. I'm also waiting on the sequel from the library. I was so pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed this book. Are you going to read the Testaments? The sequel provides some interesting background and new perspectives, especially on Aunt Lydia. Despite my love of Handmaid's Tale, I was hesitant to read the sequel, but holy moly was I glad I did. So very good. I can't remember where I learned this bit of info. I read or heard somewhere that all of the things mentioned in Handmaid's Tale had actually been done into society at some point, which made it even more harrowing to me. Great Red. She mentions that in the afterword of my edition. She said she didn't want to put anything in the book that didn't currently exist or that hadn't existed previously to keep it grounded in reality. Really? I tried to read it, got maybe a chapter in and gave up in absolutely boredom. I wanted to like it, but just couldn't get into it. Does it ever get more engaging, or is it more just literature? I'm wondering if I should subject myself to the book again in hopes it improves. I can't say for sure, as it grabbed me right away and didn't let go. However, I have noticed that the book is very polarizing along gender lines. Every woman I know who has read it loved it, and most of the men I know were lukewarm about it or couldn't get into it at all. It is probably much easier for me, being a young woman, to imagine myself in Offred's shoes than it would be for a man in his 40s, for example. I was expecting to hate this book and I loved it, fully agree with it being one of the best books I've ever read. It's amazing how much history and personality every single character has, regardless of how much they're in the book, and the overall feeling of the book is so oppressive. I really wish I had chosen this book when I was in high school instead of Brave New World. I would have had way more fun with studying it. I think it was terribly clever of Atwood to make us bond and sympathize with Offred's plight and then yank the rug out by having a bunch of people cast doubt on the reliability of her narrative. I'm assuming you've never dealt with historians before. Their entire job when presented with a previously unknown primary source is to try and validate it as much as possible to establish provenance. It's why they tried to track down who had owned the house the tapes were found in at the time, to try and trace the lineage of the documents so they could validate as much of it as they could. As for doubting Offred, they didn't do so any more than she did, as she states multiple times within the narrative that she's providing recollections that have been colored and altered by the years since the events. The academics aren't saying she's lying, they're simply repeating what Offred said and reiterating that there would have been no way for her to record the story at the time it happened, and that has to be taken into account. I put off reading the book because of how annoying the show was. I know that they're usually different things, but I remember people always saying how close they were in plot. Took the leap a month and a half back and read the book in an afternoon. One of the strongest narrations I've ever read from a character. A truly incredible book. Rushed out to buy the testaments after and was wholeheartedly disappointed. The plot felt super lazy and predictable. The only redeeming thing about it is Aunt Lydia's story, and even that isn't enough to save it. I finished the book a few days ago and I have very mixed feelings about it. First, the universe. It's very well developed. Usually when I read a dystopian novel I end up with a lot of questions about the world the characters live in, but not with this book. It was extremely well done. She developed the whole society around one character and explained everything through the same character, Offred. However, regarding the characters themselves, I was really disappointed. There is no character development at all. We don't know anything about them, and I get this is the point, but the end of the book should have brought some answers as to who is part of what. But this is not the case. And I know there is a sequel, but the story happens 15 years earlier and focuses on another character. So we will never know. Offred is seen by a lot of people as rebellious. She is definitely not. She just agrees to everything. Even when she loses her job at the beginning of the creation of Gilead, she observes Luke's reaction, does not agree, but still does not say anything. And the same patterns goes on and on for the entire book. Nothing happens. She just follows the flow. Even when she has an opportunity to be part of the rebellion, she turns it down. I feel like this book could be a documentary on Gilead explaining how the society works through the eyes of an handmaid. But that's it. I'm currently reading the sequel, which feels to be very much subpar when compared to the original. In the original, Atwood is representing the inner reality of an powerless person. Offred has almost no agency left to her, and her small acts of rebellion are mostly something that happens in her head. It's more of a psychological study of how person robbed of agency find ways to cope and keep living, instead of action or plot-driven narrative. The Testaments is pretty much opposite. There's 3 narrators, quite a bit of action, and instead of a psychologically lush character study, 2 out of 3 narrators are flat. The Handmaid's Tale is unique in its perspective and scope. It's not a tale of dystopian society as such, but of what it does to someone to be churned in the gears of one. The focus is laser sharp, the prose evocative, and the story is effective. Even the epilogue serves this perfectly. After spending time inside Offred's head, in the constant powerless dread, the jump to academic banter is extremely jarring. Her pain and weakness has been poured to your heart, and then suddenly it is discussed like a dissection of a frog. Even after, she is powerless to control her life, and the perception of it oppression has not been erased by time. But yeah, really good book. Shame that the sequel is so much more trivial. Atwood can obviously still write entertaining and effective prose, but not much more is being really said in the Testaments. I would think that if the focus was solely on Aunt Lydia, it could be an effective polar opposite on how to manage to live under the enormous pressure a regime like Gilead puts on people. On the people who manage to swim along the current of violent history. Not only is that book very good, it's also very relevant today as well. Also, I thought the 1990 film adaptation of the book was good. Can't say the same about the series. There you have it, interesting comments by Reddit users on The Handmaid's Tale. Note: books talked about in the video can be accessed through the link on the description below. Thank you for watching till the end. If you loved the video, don't forget to press the like button and also subscribe to I Love Reading. See you on the next video.